thing. We all need to be. The people down here, the people working in these buildings, we need to be one thing. Pro-truth.
But I'm ashamed to say that I was not a protester that weekend. I was just snatched up along with, I'm an average Canadian dude. That's who I am. Well, actually, that's who I was 2 weeks ago. Now I'm a protester. That's who I am now.
I attended my first protest on the Monday in solidarity, and I will continue now, and my eyes have been awoken to what's going on. I didn't care much for politics. I didn't care, you know, as long as I could go to work, make my money, and spend it. Now, I see the world through different eyes. I've awoken. I don't want to be part of this corporatized system.
It's August 23rd, 2010, and we are currently standing right out front of the Ontario Court of Justice. Now, today is the day where over 300 people are going to be processed for their arrests that were made during the G20 summit weekend.
You rocks! Yeah!
There are some matters that we have dealt with either through outright withdrawal of the charges. In some cases, either some type of a diversion from the court process was done. Donations tend to be the simplest one because you can do that here, proceed with it now, give the money, and then the individual can, the charge is withdrawn, and they are out of the court process.
Are they accepting responsibility?
No, there is no admission of responsibility with this. It's simply a donation is done, and the person walks away from court without necessity of an admission of any responsibility of donors.
How many officers have been charged with assault?
Okay.
How many officers have been charged with assault?
All right. So you had a question?
How many officers have been charged with assault? Why are people having come back in October who are innocent? People who
Is there a single cop being prosecuted?
One cop? One police officer? Why are people having come back in October who are innocent?
Police came in and broke into my home at 4 in the morning. It was the gangs and guns unit with, you know, guns drawn and plainclothes officers with just their bulletproof vests and a bunch of guns pointed at our heads. The conspiracy I'm charged in is alleged to be responsible for everything that happened on the streets on Saturday, which is, you know, it's kind of preposterous to allege some kind of anarchist hierarchy. All this criminalization and the crackdown on dissent and the attacks on social movements is nothing new. And I think it's really important for people to continue the work of you know, challenging the system that targets people for marginalization and oppression and takes away from people's ability to build strong communities and to build a better world, and that is the most important thing for people to do moving forward, is to continue challenging and to continue building our movements and building linkages between the various struggles that we're all involved in.
We all have our opinions based on our life experience, and one of the things we have to realize is that opinion is constantly being conditioned by mass media. We're constantly being indoctrinated by certain perspectives. Maybe the things I know aren't true. Maybe the paradigms that I've been used to aren't accurate. And so when I hear a thought that might sound very disturbing, might sound that's not even true, may even sound like a lie, let me at least authentically consider it so that I can see all the possibilities as opposed to being so attached to one mainstream perspective.
Corporate media has different responsibilities than, say, alternative media like this. You have to go into that and not be naive about it. You have to realize where they're coming from and not let it affect the validity of your message and your voice and your value system. This is about standing up for what you believe in, and it's hard, but just remember that nobody can tell you that it's not important.
Everybody's got to start carrying around cameras, okay? Whatever they try to tell you, no, you can't film here, you can't film here, that's exactly when you need to hit record, and you got to keep your cameras recording.
I think the fact that people here took the responsibility of stopping in what were often dangerous situations to take photographs, to mount the photographs, to put them out in the public eye, speaks to a really engaged public. We are calling for a public inquiry held by the federal government. You may be aware that there are numbers of public inquiries already started up. The Toronto Police Service Board has begun a public inquiry. The Ombudsman has begun a public inquiry. There's another inquiry held that the province is holding on the Public Works Act, this mysterious act that supposedly existed and then maybe didn't exist. All of these things are pieces of a patchwork, but we need to be able to put this together. I think you're probably aware that 1,100 people were arrested, the largest mass arrest in Canadian history. So to say that that was really a rotten weekend is putting it mildly. It was an historic weekend.
The CCLA and other groups were meeting with the police in the weeks before the G20 weekend, basically to understand what the rules would be in respect of the scope of peaceful protesting. At no time did either police force advise the CCLA or any other group of this regulation. Indeed, as their lawyer, I was dealing with their lawyers throughout the legal process in the days before the G20. At no time was I advised of this regulation.
The investigation I'm reporting on today is the first of several public attempts to get to the bottom of exactly what happened here during the week of the summit, why it happened, and what can be done to ensure it never happens again. My investigation focused on the province's role in promoting what became known as the secret security regulation, a little known and widely misunderstood legal measure that was supposed to help the police keep the peace, but in my view, wound up contributing to massive violations of civil rights. Some people in the ministry were rightly concerned about the optics of using wartime legislation, but others saw the regulation as mere technicality. So the decision was made not to publicize it. Instead, they quietly handed the police extravagant, sweeping powers under 71-year-old law. Powers that would almost certainly be illegal and unconstitutional under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
And one of the main tenets of the rule of law is that the police will not overreact. The police will only detain people if they have reasonable and probable grounds that they have committed an offense. Our Supreme Court has been very, very clear in that regard, that these kinds of restraints are necessary on the police services, otherwise we will end up to be a police state. And that kind of excessive and arbitrary power which the police exercised on that occasion is shocking and appalling in this day and age. And what is more shocking is that no one has come to the fore to be accountable for this crucial undermining of the rule of law.
Reviving this dormant piece of legislation, coupled with the adoption of the regulation, created a legal landscape where people were detained by the police and compelled to identify themselves, answer questions, and submit to warrantless searches, even if they simply wanted to walk away.
But we also know that there may be a small number of people who use that crowd, the anonymity of a crowd, to throw rocks and to break windows and to start fires, and will attempt to incite violent confrontation with the police. They had an idea that this was going to happen. In fact, that was the undertaking they gave to the judge on the injunction. We need the sonic cannon because there's going to be this rogue element. Even if it was unexpected, it doesn't give you the right to arrest hundreds of innocent people.
You're within 5 meters of this wall, so please turn off your video camera. Okay. Public Works Act states that, so please.
Because we're
show your identification of these officers.
5 meters from this wall. All right, we'll stop filming. But it's because obviously
your identification, please.
You can't do that. There's no legal basis for the police to do that, unless, of course, they're relying on the Public Works Protection Act, which is wartime legislation. You know, the government, the ministry had its website. The City of Toronto had a website. The integrated security unit had websites, had ads in the paper, warning about street closures, things that were going to happen. Was there any at one point mention that the police had a right, according to a 1939 law, to arbitrarily detain citizens kilometers away from the fence, to search their belongings, to force them to identify themselves? No, at any time there was not, and that was a conscious, premeditated decision by the authorities. Apart from a coterie of senior officials in government and the Toronto Police Service, no one else was aware of the existence of this regulation or the fact that they would trigger what amounted to martial law in downtown Toronto.
We're at Queen's Park, the same place they came to get the peaceful demonstration, to peacefully protest, you know? And that's what we were doing. We were peacefully protesting until we were attacked. And I want to say that I'm just one of 1,100 who was beaten and hurt and brought to jail and unfairly. When I got arrested, I got banned from Toronto. I had to go stay at my mom's place as a condition of my bail. And I lived literally like a block that way. 31 hours I was detained.
You didn't do anything illegal?
Nothing at all. I did nothing at all. All my charges dropped, everything. They had charged me for assault on a police officer.
And a public inquiry, one public inquiry, not 6, is clearly necessary not only to determine what happened and to place accountability, but to ensure that in the future no government will so cavalierly gamble with and suspend our civil liberties, which are too important for the politicians we apparently have.
And for the citizens of Toronto, the days up to and including the weekend of the G20 will live in infamy as a time period where martial law set in the city of Toronto, leading to the most massive compromise of civil liberties in Canadian history. And we can never let that happen again.